told me that he never even considered voice-activated recorders until he talked to his nephew. Let's go. Our marriage had always been built on a foundation of trust, love, and mutual respect. Over the years, we had tackled countless challenges, always emerging stronger and more united. But the issue of open relationships had proven to be a divisive force, casting a dark shadow over our once happy union. It was an issue that had first surfaced a few years ago, and it had continued to rear its head in our discussions ever since. On that particular evening, the tension in the air was palpable as we sat down to have yet another conversation about open relationships. I felt a heavy sense of dread in the pit of my stomach as we began to discuss the topic, fearing that it might be the straw that broke the camel's back. As I listened to my wife Pat passionately argue in favor of the idea, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of hurt and betrayal. It felt as though she was asking for permission to cheat on me, to break the sacred bond that we had spent nearly a decade nurturing. My mind raced with questions. Was our love not enough for her anymore? Was I no longer enough for her? I tried to maintain my composure, swallowing the hurt and anger that threatened to overwhelm me. I knew that this was an important conversation and I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. I needed to express my feelings clearly and calmly in the hope that we could find some common ground and resolve this issue. Once and for all, I didn't marry you to share you. I told her, my voice steady but firm. I could see the irritation flicker across her face. But I continued, when we made our vows, we promised to be there for each other through thick and thin, to love and cherish one another and to be faithful to each other. I don't believe that an open relationship aligns with those values, and I'm not willing to change them. Now, her response was dismissive as she rolled her eyes and told me that I was overreacting. She insisted that exploring an open relationship wouldn't diminish our love for each other, and that it could even strengthen our bond by introducing new experiences into our lives. But I couldn't shake the feeling that allowing other people into our relationship would only serve to erode the trust and intimacy that we have built over the years. We argued long into the night, each of us growing more frustrated and hurt by the minute. By the time we finally went to bed, we were no closer to a resolution, and I couldn't help but feel as though a chasm had begun to form between us. Little did I know that this was only the beginning of our marital turmoil. As the weeks wore on, the rift between us only seemed to grow wider. Our intimacy waned, with my wife becoming increasingly distant and uninterested in physical affection. I found myself lying awake at night, plagued by thoughts of her betraying me behind my back. She began spending more and more time with her friends from work, as well as reconnecting with old friends from her childhood. While I knew that it was healthy for both of us to maintain our own social lives, I couldn't help but feel an annoying sense of unease. Each time she went out without me, I found myself obsessively checking her social media, trying to glean some insight into her activities and the people she was spending time with. It was during this time of escalating suspicion that I had a casual conversation with my nephew about the latest technology in surveillance devices. He told me about voice-activated recorders and GPS trackers and how they could be used to discreetly monitor someone's activities as he spoke. I felt a mixture of intrigue and guilt wash over me. The idea of spying on my wife made me deeply uncomfortable. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss in our relationship. I desperately needed answers. And this seemed like the only way to get them without resorting to hiring a private investigator, which was an expense I couldn't afford. After conducting some research on the best devices available, I made the difficult decision to purchase 2 voice-activated recorders and a GPS tracker. When they arrived, I carefully installed them in her car, my hand shaking slightly as I grappled with the knowledge that I was invading her privacy. I knew that I was crossing a line, but I couldn't bear the thought of living in the dark any longer. For the first few days, I listened anxiously to the recordings, hoping to find some evidence that would either confirm or dispel my suspicions. But it wasn't until the end of the first week that I discovered the painful truth. My wife had been unfaithful to me. The sound of her voice, mingled with those of the men she had been seeing, was a gut-wrenching confirmation of my worst fears. I also found a conversation in which she bad-mouthed me to her friends, describing me as lame and boring. The betrayal cut deep, and I felt as though the wind had been knocked out of me. It was one thing to know that she had been unfaithful, but to hear her speak so disparagingly about me was a whole new level of hurt. As the initial shock began to wear off, I knew that I couldn't just sit idly by and let her continue to deceive me. I needed to take action and protect myself both emotionally and financially. I opened a separate bank account, careful not to arouse suspicion by transferring money from our joint account. I also began the process of distancing myself from her emotionally, no longer initiating physical contact or offering her any affection with a heavy heart. I realized that our marriage was beyond repair and it was time to take the necessary steps to end it, as difficult as it was to accept. I knew that I deserved better and that I needed to be strong in order to face the challenges that lay ahead, determined to protect myself and my interests. I decided to consult an attorney. I presented him with the evidence. I had gathered the recordings of my wife's infidelity and her disparaging comments about me. I explained the situation and my desire to file for divorce. My attorney listened carefully, offering his sympathy and professional guidance on the best course of action. He informed me that while Michigan is a no-fault state, the evidence of her infidelity could potentially be used to my advantage in negotiating the terms of the divorce, especially when it came to alimony. He advised me to gather more evidence if possible to strengthen my case and ensure a fair outcome. Taking my attorney's advice to heart, I decided to gather more evidence of my wife's infidelity. I rented a car to follow her discreetly, ensuring that she wouldn't recognize me or become suspicious. As I trailed her movements, I documented everything I saw with my phone: photos of her kissing other men, videos of them holding hands and embracing, and even some of them groping her in public. It was excruciating to witness these intimate moments between my wife and other men. But I knew that it was necessary in order to protect myself during the divorce proceedings. With a growing sense of resolve, I forwarded all the evidence I had collected to my attorney. He assured me that this would significantly bolster my case and that he would do everything in his power to ensure a favorable outcome for me with my evidence securely in my attorney's hands. I decided it was time to take the final step and file for divorce. My wife was served with the papers at her workplace and her reaction was nothing short of explosive. She called me, her voice shaking with rage, hurling insults and accusations at me, but I refused to engage in her outburst, knowing that I had made the right decision and that there was no turning back. Now, in the meantime, I moved out of the house we had been renting, putting physical distance between us and giving myself the space I needed to process the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. It was a difficult transition, but I knew that it was a necessary step toward healing and rebuilding my life. The day of the divorce hearing arrived and I steeled myself for the confrontation. My wife's attorney attempted to argue that I was required to pay alimony. But my attorney countered with the evidence I had gathered. He presented the photos, videos and recordings demonstrating her infidelity and betrayal. The judge listened carefully to both sides before making a decision. In the end, he agreed with my attorney and denied her any financial support. Relief washed over me as I realized that the battle was finally over and I could begin the process of rebuilding my life. In the months following the divorce, I learned through one of her friends that my ex-wife had moved in with one of the men. She had cheated on me with her friend, confided in me that the man was a deadbeat, unemployed, and contributed nothing to their household. It was a bittersweet revelation, but it also confirmed that I had made the right choice in ending the marriage. As I continued to heal, I began to rediscover my own sense of self and independence. I pursued hobbies and interests that I had neglected during our marriage. And I slowly started to rebuild my social circle. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones with time. I felt ready to dip my toes back into the dating pool. I knew that I wasn't quite ready to commit to a serious relationship, but I was eager to explore the possibilities and meet new people. I tried my hand at online dating, attending singles events and even accepting setups from well-meaning friends. I approached each new encounter with an open mind and heart, taking the time to learn about myself and what I wanted in a partner. There were moments of awkwardness and disappointment, but there were also moments of excitement and connection through it all. I reminded myself that I was on a journey of self-discovery and that each experience, good or bad, was a valuable lesson. As the months passed, I began to come to terms with the reality of my situation. I had survived the heartbreak of my marriage collapsing, and I had emerged stronger and tougher than before. I made a conscious effort to work on myself, attending therapy sessions and participating in support groups for divorced individuals. Through these experiences, I learned that healing is not an easy process, but rather a series of ups and downs. There were days when I felt like I had made great progress and others when I felt like I was back at square one, but I remained committed to my journey, trusting that with time and effort, I would find peace and happiness. Once again, as I continued to heal, I came to understand that my life was not defined by my failed marriage, but rather by the choices I made moving forward. I began to embrace my newfound freedom, allowing myself to dream and imagine a future that was entirely my own. I knew that I still had a long road ahead of me, but I was determined to make the most of the opportunities that lay before me. I started to set new goals for myself, both personally and professionally, focused on my career as a city surveyor, pursuing opportunities for growth and development. I also made a conscious effort to maintain a healthy work-life balance, dedicating time to my hobbies, friendships and self-care. Although I have been deeply hurt by my ex-wife's betrayal, I chose not to let it characterize my life or hold me back. Instead, I used it as a catalyst for growth and transformation, emerging as a stronger and tougher person. With each new day, I took another step forward on my journey toward healing, knowing that I was creating a new beginning for myself, one filled with hope, happiness and endless possibilities.